The American diet has changed a lot in the past 100 years. As our portion sizes grow, the number of whole foods we consume continues to go down. In fact, nearly everything we eat today is processed in some way. But contrary to what you may think, Dr. Philippa Jewell says processed foods aren't the main problem.
Processed foods are relatively simple foods such as canned vegetables or canned fish or smoked fish, etc., artisanal cheeses and artisanal bread. And there doesn't seem to be any concern about eating these types of foods, but the concern is really the ultra-processed foods.
Jewell is an assistant professor in the Department of Health Policy and Management at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University. The bulk of her research is focused on ultra-processed foods.
So ultra-processed foods are foods that have gone through several stages of processing and usually contain very little whole foods. So they're primarily based on starches and fats and sweeteners, often contain different additives such as emulsifiers or food dyes or flavors, etc. So things that you wouldn't find in your kitchen, that you wouldn't cook with at home.
They're also convenient, often ready to eat or require a few minutes in the microwave. Jewell says these ultra-processed foods first popped up in the 1950s with products that would speed up cooking, like Hamburger Helper.
Then in the 1980s, there were big technological advancements in food technology. So that's really when, we started creating this huge variety of highly processed foods that we haven't really had before.
Jewell says that today, ultra-processed foods make up about 60% of the average American's diet.
And it includes everything from things that we think about as junk food, like, sodas and sugar-sweetened beverages and fast food and those kinds of things, but also many other foods that we may perceive as healthy, such as many breakfast cereals, sweetened and flavored yogurts, things like that. And many breads in a normal supermarket are ultra-processed as well.
But why is this such a big deal? Jewell says foods that have been ultra-processed are nutritionally unbalanced.
They're higher in calories, they're higher in saturated fats, they're higher in added sugar, they're lower in fiber, they're lower in protein, and they're lower in most micronutrients. Also, there is one randomized controlled trial, so an experimental study that showed that when people eat a diet based on ultra-processed foods, they actually ate unconsciously 500 calories more per day on average than when they ate an unprocessed diet. And there are plenty of observational studies that show that eating a lot of these foods increases your risk for obesity, for diabetes, for hypertension. There are even some reports that links these foods to depression and cognitive decline and cancer as well.
The lack of real ingredients in our diets deplete our bodies of the fuel needed for us to function properly. Dr. Chris Damon says this type of diet can really mess up our gut health.
The microbiome that exists within our gut, you could think of them like our partners in health. And just like us, they need to eat. And you could kind of think of the last 20 years as us starving them with the types of foods that we've been giving them, which have had a lot of their prebiotic components stripped.
Damon is a clinical associate professor of gastroenterology and medicine at the University of Washington and the chief medical and science officer at the nutrition company Supergut. He explains that prebiotics are essentially food for the microbes in our gut and often come from fiber. But that's not the only source.
We've learned recently that certain types of functional fats also support a healthy microbiome. Phytonutrients like polyphenols are important for growing a healthy ecosystem in our gut.
Polyphenols are compounds found in many plant foods, such as nuts and berries.
And then lastly, fermentation products from fermented foods are also supportive.
Damon refers to functional fats, fermented foods, fiber, and polyphenols as the 4 phonetic Fs of food. These are the components that are needed to build a strong gut microbiome. But what exactly are they feeding? You may be familiar with the term probiotics as a supplement pill you can pick up at the grocery store, but these are living bacteria present in our gut.
These are bacteria that are normally present in food, largely, not exclusively. If you want to get kind of the whole complement of probiotics, one way of doing that is to actually have fermented foods, which will contain, the lactobacillus present in yogurts and in fermented cabbage like kimchi and sauerkraut.
The process of fermentation has been used for centuries to help preserve food. It's an added benefit that the method also enhanced the food's nutritional qualities. Unfortunately, with the rise of ultra-processing, our diets have become deficient in many of these necessary nutrients. Juul's research shows that our consumption of ultra-processed foods has increased since 2018, while our rates of eating minimally processed foods has declined. This may be one of the reasons that prebiotic and probiotic supplement markets have grown so rapidly. And though buying these products may seem like the perfect solution, Damon says it can be hard to trust what you're getting.
One of the challenges with probiotics, though, is the specificity of the strains. And so one lactobacillus may not be another lactobacillus. There's a lot of questions, too, with quality control of what you might be receiving over the counter. And there's a question of whether those bacteria remain alive and viable or not, and how important that viability is for their activity.
Damon recommends going straight to the source by including fermented foods into your diet to get the full benefits of probiotics. For prebiotics, he says we should all be eating more fiber.
That said, I'm actually a pragmatist among nutritionists, and I recognize that it's really hard to get enough fiber in particular into individuals' diets. Only 5% consume enough. Most people consume about 15 grams, and it's recommended to consume on the order of about 30 grams.
He says it may be easier to get viable prebiotic supplements because they're not alive like probiotics. However, the FDA doesn't approve dietary supplements for safety and effectiveness, so you'll be taking a gamble with whichever product you buy. You can find more information about Dr. Chris Damon, Dr. Philippa Juul, and all of our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. This segment originally aired in March 2023. For more behind the scenes, follow Radio Health Journal on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.